I was not living a good life. I was stealing to help pay bills.
Are you proud of yourself?
Oh, that's a really good question. Just thinking about, I'm trying not to get emotional here, but it was hard. I just told myself early on, no matter what, those are the 3 words I live by, no matter what, you have to make it happen. My dad was not in our life, so I had no one. My older sister was always trying to kill herself, trying to kill me. I had no one to guide me. I had to teach myself. I had to tell myself. I had to motivate myself and use that ultimately to get me where I'm at now.
Living in a car as a child and traveling alone on a Greyhound at 13 with just a trash bag of belongings, Crystal Moya learned early that survival requires 3 words: no matter what. Now, as Vice President of Operations at Luma Residential, she brings rare empathy to multifamily, having experienced firsthand what it means to be without a home. Her story proves that sometimes life gives you the most by giving you the least, transforming hardship into a powerful ability to see humanity where others might only see transactions.
It was really up to me if I wanted to change the course of our lives. I didn't have a choice.
Are you happy?
Am I happy? That's a really good question. I think happiness is found in a lot of different things. I do my best to create happiness in everything I do, everywhere I'm at.
At this point in your life, who did you trust?
Oh, goodness.
Crystal, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Shiv. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're the first person to record in the RV, so this is really exciting.
I'm very honored and excited as well.
This will be awesome. Okay, I want to start with a quote by you, or at least a quote in your bio.
Oh, okay.
2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
Yes,
What does that mean to you?
Poem from Robert Frost. To me, at that moment, when I put it together, which was about 10 years ago, when I put together the bio, not the poem,
Yeah.
it really resonated with me, and it still does, because I was in my late 20s just finishing up my bachelor's degree. And the poem comforted me knowing that it's okay to not be like everyone else, right? Jump into things right after high school. Sometimes your circumstances don't allow for that. And it's okay. It's okay to take the road less traveled, whether it's in education, a job you take, or your career path, or relationship-wise. It's okay to do things differently.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. So I think in your bio, when I read that, there were so many things that stood out to me. But I think where I want to start is what your earliest memories in your childhood was like. You talked a little bit about it, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Sure. Well, both of my parents are from Mexico. And so I'm a first, generation American. I was born here in the States. We were migrants. So we, would work a lot up north, primarily Colorado. That's where I was born. My parents separated when I was very young. We were homeless for a bit. My mother, my 2 sisters, and I. And to now work in the industry that I am is, it's kind of amazing to know where I grew up. We moved around a lot. Once my mom was, divorced from my father, she and I, my sisters, we moved to a lot of different places. So there was a lot of instability, moving from a different school. Documents were always lost. Where's my birth certificate? Where's my social security card? Things like that were always lost because there was always more important things to focus on. Like, where are we going to get our next meal? Where are we going to stay tonight? Things of that nature. And, the adversities kind of make you stronger. Sometimes the things that you face day to day are a little more challenging when you don't have opportunities like others might have, like having a warm home, things of that nature. It made me better. I firmly believe that. A lot of people take their obstacles and allow them to bring them down. And there's more power, I believe, in finding the silver lining in the adversity, right? Allowing it to make you stronger and better. And it also gives you a certain level of compassion for people around you. So I think you live a better life. You live happier as a result because it becomes more fulfilling. Life becomes more fulfilling when you have to work harder to get what you want.
How many siblings do you have?
2 sisters.
2 sisters. Are you the oldest?
I'm the middle child.
Oh, you're the middle
Yes,
child.
I'm the black sheep.
Okay, I'm also the middle child.
Okay.
Do you believe in the whole middle child syndrome thing? Do you feel like you had any experiences?
I think that I think yes, because the older child always gets the most attention. They're the first one. The youngest one, they're the baby. You can't do anything. In the middle, you're just like chopped liver. You're just there. You're just there. No one really pays attention to you. No one wants to touch you because you're just there. But I don't mind it at all. I love it, and I think that the point that I'm at now in my life, a lot of people come to me. My sisters come to me, my mom comes to me, and my dad comes to me. Like, they all come to me, and it's really nice to be the person, the strong one that everybody has to turn to.
So when you say they come to you, what does that mean?
For anything.
Support.
Life advice, financial support, anything, I'm stuck in this situation with insurance. I'm stuck in this situation with my son's school or whatever it might be with my job. They call me. Even though I might not have the answers, I always find a way to find the answers, or I know people that know the answers. So it's good to have a big network. And again, that's all. I guess we'll get into that a little later, but it's nice to be needed.
So what do your siblings do right now for work?
My older sister is unemployed. My younger sister is a nail technician.
Okay. Why do you think, actually, before I ask that question, when you look at the three of you, how do you all differ and how are you all similar?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think I'm more strong-minded and getting a little more personal here, but my older sister was molested by our father when she was very young. And that's primarily what drove my parents to divorce. They had always fought when we were little. My dad would get physical with my mother. He would beat her. And my mother never left him. She tolerated it for us. But ultimately, when she found out about what had happened with my older sister, her daughter, she obviously was not going to go back to my father. And that's what led to just the family just separating and my mom, having a difficult time becoming the sole breadwinner of the house. And that's what led to us being homeless and living out of our car. And but because of that, my older sister has had some issues that she has had to overcome, but she is probably one of the strongest women that I know. And my little sister, unfortunately, didn't get to experience what life is like to have a mother and father. She was very little when they separated. And so I think she's a little more level-headed because of the fact that she didn't get to experience it. So the life she's known has always just been with my mother. And so a little different. We're all a little different. My younger sister's also very quiet, very meek, very, just to herself. While my older sister and I are a little more outspoken. But yeah, I think they're both great, loving to pieces, and we've done the best we can with what we've been given.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is it? How old were you when you were living in the car?
Oof. We had to been, I was under 11 years of age, between 8 and 11.
What do you remember during that time?
Very small glimpses. I remember we lived in Colorado, and I remember this lake. It had to be like a lake or a pond that we would sit by quite often. And my mom would buy a loaf of bread, and it was this pre-made chicken salad, in a bag. And it was, I guess, very affordable. But to us, it was very good. And we would make chicken salad sandwiches, and we would share one drink. And despite our circumstances, I was always real. I didn't like to share drinks because my little sister would always have backwash in the drinks, and I was like, "Yeah, I won't drink anything. It's okay." I still had standards, I guess. I don't know. And so it's just silly to think about it, but I remember those moments. I remember, our clothes in the trunk, our everything laying in the back of the car, and laying on our blankets. Blankets were layered in the back seat of the car, and that's where we would sleep, And it was a very big car, so we had space, and wasn't like a van. It was just an older version. I don't ask me what make or model, but I just remember it was very spacious. But it could be that I was little, and that's my memory. That's what it was like.
So if this was between 8 and 11, so you were going to school, so you were in either 4th grade, 5th grade,
Right.
6th grade.
Right.
What do you remember that being like going to school? Did you remember thinking about it and being embarrassed about it, or did it not even cross your mind?
Nope, it would not cross my mind. What I would be embarrassed about sometimes was the car we would be dropped off in. If we were dropped off at school. I remember being embarrassed sometimes having to wear my mom's clothes because we didn't have clean clothes. And it was big on me, or my older sister's clothes, and it was big on me. And so those were little things. I was like, well, if somebody asks, I'll just tell them that's the style I like, But it's just thinking about. I'm trying not to get emotional here, but it was hard. And like I said, sometimes those things make you better. It makes you have more compassion and empathy. And being in the industry that I'm in, I'm glad I lived it, because it allows me to sympathize more with our residents, the people that we serve, and bring a level of understanding that others might not have, and it's just really made me want to break that curse that was on us for so long. And I knew that if anyone was going to make it happen, it had to be me. And I just told myself early on, no matter what, those are the 3 words I live by, no matter what, you have to make it happen. No matter how tired you are, no matter, what it is, eventually as an adult, when I had my son, I said, even if I don't have a babysitter, if I don't have a car, whatever it is, I have to make it happen, despite the circumstances. And that's what drove me after that, because I didn't have my parents. They were from Mexico. They weren't educated. My mom worked at McDonald's, and my dad was not in our life. So I had no one. I had no one to guide me. We didn't have family where we were at, and no one to teach me. And there may have been resources, but I was not aware of them. And so I had to teach myself. I had to tell myself. I had to motivate myself and use that ultimately to get me where I'm at now.
It's really inspiring.
Thank you.
Honestly, it's really, really inspiring for you to I don't think we've not had anybody on the show with such a impactful story. So I first of all, I can't even, I'm trying to live the experience, but I obviously didn't live it. So I really appreciate you sharing.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Where do you get so when all of this is happening, when you're a early teenager, are you thinking that you want to get out of, are you thinking I have to do this no matter what? Or was this a thought that you developed later on?
It was a thought that I developed later on. I had to have been about 12, 13 years old. Like I said, we were moving back and forth a lot. And there was a point where my mom moved us back to Texas, which is where all our family is, South Texas, to be exact. And I started going to school, and my teachers noticed that, I was a little smarter than some of the other kids. And this was in 8th grade. And I remember one of my teachers approaching me, and she said, hey, there's this school. It's a magnet school that I want you to apply for. And I had no idea what a magnet school was at that point. And I said, is there a cost? And she said, no, there's no cost, but it's a high school specifically designed for kids that want to study medicine. And I said, okay. And she's like, it's a little more challenging, so you have to be disciplined. You had to go through this application process, and you had to get teacher recommendations and whatnot. So I applied, and I was accepted. Later on, that district, South Texas High School, or South Texas ISD, they ended up opening enrollment. But during that time, you had to apply and get recommended or whatever. So I got in, but right in the summer before my freshman year, my mom decided to move us again. We moved to New Mexico, and then we moved to Memphis, all in the course of like 2-3 months. And when we were in Memphis, I told my mom, I said, I got accepted into this school and I want to go. I'm tired of moving around. Mind you, I'm 13 at this time. I'm tired of moving around. I want to go to high school all 4 years so I can have a better chance of getting into a good college, maybe scholarships. Like, I remember in that moment, that's when those thoughts started to process in my head, that it was really up to me if I wanted to change the course of our lives. And mind you, during all this period, I was in a gang. I was not living a good life. I was drinking by the time I was 11. The path that I was on was not a good one. And then I discovered a church. Again, through all of this, between the age of 11 and 13, all of this stuff is happening, right? And I discovered a church, and the church would go to the different apartment complexes. By then, we did have an apartment. And they would go and they would call little rascals, and they would take a bus to pick up these kids from these underprivileged neighborhoods to take them to church. And that's how I was introduced to God, and when we were born, we were raised Catholic, but all of that falls apart. You lose everything when you lose your family. My mom was depressed. We lived in a car, like nothing else matters but just surviving at that point. You forget everything. So being reintroduced to God and putting my life back together, being able to process things was a turning point in my life. So yes, when I was 13, I started having those thoughts, and I told my mom, going back to Memphis, I told my mom, I want to go to Med High. She said, well, if you're going to go by yourself. And she got me on a Greyhound with a black trash bag from Memphis, Tennessee, down to Wesco, Texas. I went alone. And I went to live with an aunt, and I lived out of my black trash bag for about a year and a half, until my mom moved back down to the valley. We call it the Rio Grande Valley, which is a group of towns in the deepest part of Texas, like border towns. So until she moved there, I was living with different aunts and uncles, different family members, again, living out of my black trash bag. And it's funny because I had these tennies that my dad, who, again, was not in our life, but once in a while he would appear out of nowhere. And when I was, I think, around 11 or so, he had bought me a pair of shoes. And I used those shoes from when I was 11 till all of high school. I didn't have any other pairs. I didn't have another pair of Denny's. So when they would fall apart, I would use plumber's glue. I would glue them back together. That was my pair of shoes that I would use all the time. And I went back down to Wesco and lived with some aunts, started school at Med High, and, went through a lot of things for those 4 years, but ultimately graduated high school from Med High. It was called South Texas High School for Health Professions, and I wanted to be a trauma surgeon. And obviously, I'm sitting in front of you. I'm a vice president of operations in multifamily, but I wouldn't. That's another story in and of itself. But when my mom finally moved down to the Rio Grande Valley, and we all moved together again, because my older sister was living somewhere else, I was living in another place, and my younger sister was the only one with my mom at that point. So she moved down to deep South Texas, and she got us all together, and we were renting a small house. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath for all 4 of us, and it didn't have HVAC system. So when it got cold, it got real cold. Got hot, it got real hot. And those are some of the little things that people don't think about. When you're either homeless or you're very poor, people don't think about, you don't have HVAC. It's very uncomfortable to do your homework when your hands are freezing. It's very difficult to be able to even form a sentence when you're sweating and you have to have the windows open, and you probably don't have window screens, so the mosquitoes are coming in, I would open the oven. I would turn on the oven. I would sit in front of the oven and do my homework. That was the only way I could actually do work, Talk about not having internet. I mean, at that point, AOL dial-up was like we didn't have it, I didn't, much less had a computer. I had to rent a computer from the library, thank goodness. they would let us rent out computers. And there were these big bags with this big bulky computer inside of it. I would go home carrying it. But it's what I had to do. I didn't have a choice.
I want to go back to something you said. If you're comfortable talking about it, you were part of a gang.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like at 11 years old?
Goodness. So we called ourselves the Cedar Ridge Gangsters. It's so ridiculous now, but at that point, they were my family. They were all I knew. My mom, I can't blame her. I don't judge her, but she wasn't around much. She was just trying to look for love, and she was lost. She was depressed. And as an adult now, I understand. Right at that moment, I didn't. I just didn't feel love. Dad was not in our life. Mom was not around. My older sister was always trying to kill herself, trying to kill me, constantly. She was not in the right mind. And my little sister, I don't even remember too much about her because I would go to school and I would go be with my friends, our gang, and I got into some not great things. I was stealing to help pay bills to feed myself. I would steal things. I would sell them to people. They would place orders with me, and they'd tell me this is what I need. If it was baby clothes, if it was whatever it was, and they would pay me for it. And that's how I would pay for things and get by. So it was not a great life, but it was what I knew. And it was the only place where someone gave me attention.
When all of this was happening, your mom was still so she was working at McDonald's.
Yes.
So you didn't see her because she was working so much, and she also was lost herself.
Yes, she, had her boyfriends, and she would go stay with them. And I
Who
remember
would watch you guys in the car?
well, when we were already living, like, when I remember all of this was when we were already living in an apartment. And she wasn't around much. And I would remember fighting with her and telling her, like, if you don't come home tonight, I'm not going to go to school tomorrow. And she wouldn't go home, so I wouldn't go to school. And there was a point, I remember, where my coach, because I was always into athletics, I was always a little tomboy, and PE, I guess, I don't know if they had athletics, I don't remember. But he would go look for me at home and be like, why aren't you at school again? And I would show up in school with like scratches and bruises and be like, what happened? They knew something was up, and they would ask questions. And I would tell them my sister, she scratched me. My sister tried to cut me. My sister hit me, whatever it was, because that was usually where it was coming from, my older sister. But yeah, I missed a lot of school and I still passed miraculously. But yeah, that's what I remember.
You mentioned your dad was in and out of the picture. What was your relationship like with him? Did you know what happened?
I did know early on when it happened because my mom and my dad would separate a lot because he would hit her. So my mom would leave him and then she would get back with him. But at that point, she didn't get back with him anymore. And I had originally gone to live with my dad at first. And she's like, you need to move back with me. Your dad did this and this and this to your sister. You can't be there with him. And I remember going to like different departments, of the state, like where they would interview me and ask me questions, or I'd have to wait there while they interviewed my sisters, and I'd be drawing pictures. And then down the road in the future, like probably, I don't know, weeks or months, time for me at that point was all one. They would show me pictures I had drawn before. I'm like, what? How do they have this? Like, I drew it at that other place. But they were keeping everything as documentation. Like, why do you draw this smiley face with a tongue? I was like, well, because my older sister draws it and I copy her. Like, there was no other reason aside from I mimic what my older sister does when it comes to drawing, And, just little things like that. I remember it was, I don't know, it's kind of hard to put a timeline to it because it's also a big blur,
Do you, what do you feel growing up, despite all of this was happening, how would you describe your own internal mental state?
That's a good question. It was survival mode more than anything. It was learning how to fend for myself from others, from the world in general. I think that's what it was. It was just in survival mode.
What did you believe about the world? Did you believe the world was dangerous?
I didn't believe the world was dangerous because at that point, for me, nothing mattered as long as I was alive. I would do anything to just survive, hence the stealing. You know, it's like there are no limits, there are no bars, there's nothing. You don't think about the repercussions. You don't think about I could face jail time. You don't think about this will ruin my life. You don't think that thought is non-existent. Those words, you can't even fathom them, and there's no one in your life to tell you that either. So it's just survival. What do I need to survive?
So you moved around from the age of 13 to 18. Where all were you?
Okay, so we were moving around a lot. We moved from Colorado to Texas, from Texas to New Mexico to Tennessee. Tennessee, I moved down to Westaco, Texas by myself, went and lived with different family members they lived in towns surrounding Westaco, Texas. My mom finally moved down to the Rio Grande Valley. She rented a house in Donna. She brought us all back together, my sisters and I. We lived in that house in Donna until I graduated high school. And then I left. I went to San Antonio.
And why were you guys moving around so much?
I think part of it was because of my mom's work. At that point, she had gotten jobs with the state, working for different jails, juvenile detention centers, and she ended up building a career out of that. She never went back into fast food as a result. But they would move her around, so she would have to go to Austin. She went to New Mexico. She was able to move around because there was a lot of prisons everywhere, or juvenile detention centers where she could work at. And since she had experience, they would hire her pretty quickly. She was a cook. She wasn't like anything like high up executive. She worked in the kitchen, but it was still reputable and respectable, and she did what she had to do to at that point keep a roof over our heads, to keep a job, and she, we moved to Memphis because one of her boyfriends got out of jail, but he had to stay in the state, so we moved to Memphis because of that, and then she moved to the Rio Grande Valley because they ended up separating, and she wanted to be back with her children, I guess, at that point, wanted her children together, and she moved back to the Rio Grande Valley and has been there since until recently.
So you mentioned as a early teenager you found the church, and that was a pivotal point in your life. What did that do for you?
It gave me hope. It gave me hope, and it gave me another avenue to seek answers. I became very devout. I was very committed to the church. It was amazing. I just felt this crazy spiritual growth. And, I was speaking in tongues. I was reading the Bible every day. I was seeing verses in my dreams. God was talking to me a lot. And I think that was the life source that I needed at the most important and pressing time of my life. If not, I would have been lost. I could have ended up in jail and dead. Could have been. You probably wouldn't be sitting. I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now. Be someone else.
So you graduate from high school. Mm-hmm. You don't immediately go to college.
I did.
Oh, you did.
But then I had to stop. I moved to San Antonio. I was going to UTSA. I was working full time for West Telemarketing, and I fell into some issues there in San Antonio. I went by myself. I sourced my own apartment. I, had a lot of problems just moving from the Rio Grande Valley to San Antonio. I was driving a car that my dad had got for me. It was an old used car, but it was running kind of. And, it was constantly heating up. So on my way from the Rio Grande Valley to San Antonio, I had to stop like 4 times to like water down my car. I got pulled over. I got stung by 2 bees. I didn't have any money. Like I left the last $300 some I had with my mom because she had asked me for money. And all I had was change that I had in a vase that I had been saving up. And I remember pulling over in San Antonio because I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a phone. I had a like pay per minute phone that my mom's at the time boyfriend had given me. He said it has like 30 minutes. Use them wisely, right? And so I didn't have maps. I didn't have GPS, and I had a $1,000 scholarship check that I had gotten from LULAC. That's all I had, and my change. And I made it to San Antonio, and I was like, I need to go to the university. I need to cash this check. And I make it to the university, and they're like, we can't cash the check, but we can put half of it into your fund, which will like pay for your meals and stuff like that. And I can give you another $500 check that you can take to cash. And I was like, okay, I guess. It's funny though, when I left the university, I go to my car. I had locked my keys in my car. It's like everything that could go wrong was going wrong. And so then they send security, and it's a lady. She shows up, and she takes about an hour to unlock my car. Finally unlocks it. I was like, all right, so I need to call the landlord because I hadn't picked up the keys to my apartment. And so I call her and I said, look, I'm over here. This is what's going on. This is what happened. Please wait for me. And if you can't wait for me, just leave the keys somewhere like in the dirt next to my apartment. I don't know. Figure it out. Like leave it somewhere for me. And so I got lost in all of this. I, put $5 in gasoline to get me to the apartment. And I got lost. I couldn't find it. I had no one to call. And I called my aunt. I said, can you help me get a hotel for the night? I don't know where I'm at, and I don't have my apartment key. And she said no. And I was like, okay.
Why did she say no?
I never asked her. I've never asked her, but she said she couldn't help me. And I knew my mom couldn't help me because she didn't have money to begin with, much less a credit card. That's another thing about being poor. You don't have good credit. You don't have credit cards. Those things are not that easy. You can't just book a room. So I called a friend from high school, and I was crying, and I said, I don't know what to do. And I don't know. And he said, where are you at? I said, I'm parked outside this, I think it was a Motel 6. And I told him it's close to this McDonald's, and there's this and this, and I'm explaining where I'm at. He's like, okay, wait there. I have a cousin that lives in San Antonio. He can probably go get you. So I did not move, and he said, my cousin's going. Like, you're going to go. He's going to help you. He's going to take you where you need to go. And I said, okay, thank you. I didn't know him. Well, it turns out his cousin went to school with us, and I remember who he was, but I didn't know him. Like, I didn't know him. I just knew who he was. And so he went to get me. He took me to the apartment. Unfortunately, the landlord was gone for the day, and she did not leave me the key, so I had nowhere to stay. And he said, you can come stay with me. We have a townhome. Well, he was much more fortunate than I was. Him and his 2 siblings, who were all going to college, lived in a townhome that their father, who was a dentist, bought for them so easily. And I'm like struggling over here, and I was so grateful that they opened their home to me. I stayed there one night. The next day he took me to the bank. I got an account. I cashed my check. He took me to my apartment, and all I said was thank you. There was nothing else I could do, offer him. I didn't have any money aside from the cash I had just gotten, and I was very grateful. And I never saw him or talked to him again, But if he's hearing this, thank you. It was very important. It's something that I am very grateful for.
At this point in your life, who did you trust?
Oh my goodness, I don't think I had any trust in anyone at this point, but God. God was a big part of my life still. And it's so much so that I ended up signing up for the Navy at that point when I moved to San Antonio.
And so you leave college and you sign up for the Navy?
I was still in college. I signed up for the Navy. I was in the delayed entry program working. So the delayed entry program is where you're kind of just meeting with a recruiter. You work out, you do drills until you're sent off to boot camp.
Why did you sign up for the Navy?
I figured that was my only outlet. That was my only way to be able to get an education, have housing, and that was my answer. That was my answer. And at that point, I had an uncle, God rest his soul. He passed away during COVID in 2021, but I had an uncle that I was close to and I would write to, and he was very disciplined. And like I said, I was always a tomboy. You know, he would work out a lot, and I enjoyed that. I would work out a lot. I would go running. Despite my circumstances, I always found a way to work out and do things. And so he always taught me a lot of little things like, you know, if you don't take care of your stuff, no one else will, you know, just things like that. And so we would write to each other a lot, and seeing that things were, it appeared that things would be easier if I just joined the military.
So you're part of the military from what age to what age?
Actually, I signed up when I was 18. I was supposed to leave on the delayed entry program to boot camp May 2004, and I did not go. Supposedly I had scoliosis and all this other stuff. And then I remember my boss at that time kind of scared me, like, you should not go. There's a big war right now and like all this stuff. So I ended up getting out of the military, out of the Navy. I didn't go to boot camp and just stayed. At that point, I had to move back to the Rio Grande Valley because I ran into some problems in San Antonio. I had to move back to the Rio Grande Valley, and yeah.
And how old are you at this point?
Still 18, going on 19.
Okay. So what happens in your 20s?
So when I moved back to the Rio Grande Valley after San Antonio, I met a man who was a realtor, broker, who was selling my mom a house. And what's it called? He ended up becoming my father-in-law. I ended up dating his son. And it was that's another story. They were suing each other. It was weird. Like, they hated each other. And then I ended up meeting his son, and I got pregnant, got married. I ended up going into real estate as a result because my now ex-husband is also a real estate broker. So I was studying biology to go pre-med. I wanted to be a trauma surgeon again. And that was my goal, and I was going to do it. And then the real estate stuff happened, and I got pregnant. And so I was like, okay, well, I should work for the father of my child, you know. And I think I had taken on a job at Home Depot at that time. It's like all running it together, right? It seems like a lot of time is lapsing, but it's not. I started working in Home Depot, and he's like, you need to leave your job at Home Depot. You need to come move in with me. I'm going to take care of you. And I said, okay. I just said, okay, like, what else? There isn't a better route or option, right? And I'm going to have a child with this man, you know? So I moved in with him. And unfortunately, we did end up in a divorce 14 years later. But in that process of me being married, you know, we had problems. He had an affair, and I did not want to live dependent on him. So I decided to look for a job in the newspaper, and I found they were hiring a property manager at a 44-unit property in Wesco, Texas. So I went to interview, and she's like, you know what? Even though you don't have experience, it was a Section 8 property. Even though you don't have experience in Section 8, I did have a real estate background. And she said, you seem very smart, and I think you're going to pick it up very fast. And I said, okay. So she hired me. And at this point, I'm not living with my ex-husband. I had moved out because of what he had done. I had moved out, and I was living with my mom. And I didn't have a car, so I was going to work every day in a different car. And she was training me that first week.
Whose car were you using? Just random
Different
people.
Yeah, family, friends. I would borrow a car.
What was your conception of yourself at this time? Like, what did you think of yourself and your abilities?
I didn't believe I had much to offer at that point. I just knew that I needed to do something. If I wanted to have something of value to offer the world, I needed to do something about it. And I thought very quickly, your experience thus far has only been in real estate. Stick to real estate. There's nothing else for you to do, right? That was my thought. So I got the job. My boss asked me, like, you're showing up in a car every day, Crystal. Are you sure you can come to work? And you're coming in a different car every day. And I said, I'm having some challenges right now, but rest assured, I'm going to make this happen.
And they don't know about
They didn't. She
They
didn't.
don't. Yeah, she didn't
She
know.
didn't know all the
Okay.
details.
Yeah.
Eventually, I ended up telling her everything, but that's what started my career in multifamily. I took it as a job because I needed it, and eventually I started going back to school. I still wanted to study medicine. I don't know why. I was so stubborn. I started going to school, and my boss found out, and he's like, "Hey, my boss's boss, I heard you're going to school and you're going to be leaving us." I said, "Oh, it's going to be about another 2.5 years before I get my degree and apply for medical school and all this stuff." And I said, "But
So you were still committed to this was like a temporary job. You
Yes.
eventually wanted to finish your degree
Right.
and go to medical
Right,
school.
right.
And this is your mid-20s?
Yes. hmm
Okay.
Yes. And I had my son and we were living at my mom's. And then, life happens. My ex-husband begged me to go back home. Okay. So I ended up going back with him. And, but I was like, I'm still going to go to school. I'm still going to finish this. I'm going to go to medical school and whatnot.
Why were you so driven to go to medical school?
Because I knew that medicine was a secure way financially. And if I could make a really good money, I would do whatever I needed to do to make it happen. And so even if it meant going to school, getting my degree in medicine or bio with a minor in chem, going to medical school and doing, everything that I needed to do thereafter to become a specialist in trauma surgery, I was going to do it. My boss calls me and he said, "I heard this." And I said, "Yeah, but it's another 2.5 years. Like, don't worry about it. I'm still working. I only go to school after work. I don't take time away from work to do any of that." And he said, "Well, I don't want you to leave us. You have a lot to offer and I would like to promote you." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I want to promote you to be a regional manager."
Why did this surprise you?
Because I never considered a career in what I was doing. And but I will say this, I did want to put my best foot forward. So every day I worked hard and I wanted to know everything there was about my job. So I would study the lease. I took home my HUD 4350, which is the Bible of HUD handbooks. I took it home and I would study it. I would develop policies and systems to make our lives easier, to prepare for our on-site desk reviews that we would have every year or every 3 years, depending on how good you had it, how good you were prepared. So I would do things like that, and I would send them to my boss, like, "Hey, I did this. Hey, I did
Why
that."
would you do that? Why would you do all this?
Because I wanted to create efficiencies in the job that I was doing. I wanted to make it easier, not just for myself, but for everyone. And I said, they're always looking at this stuff. We got to build a better way of doing it to save us time, to save us energy, and to have a consistent way of doing it. So I would do all that. And because I took the HUD handbook home, I learned it and I knew what they were going to be looking for. And I knew the system or the way that I had to present it to them when they would go audit my property. So that was my way of making my life better and easier. And I think, again, from my upbringing, that was always the goal. How can I do this better? How can I make this easier, more affordable? I guess they saw that I would do all this. And I don't know. I guess that's what I was a manager. I didn't know. I was new to the industry. I didn't know any different. And I said, "What? Okay." And I was like, "How am I going to do this?" Like, I was the youngest of all the managers. Like I told him that, like, how are they going to take that? They're not going to like me being their boss. He's like, "I will help you through that." Right. And I said, "But that means this person's going to," he's like, "Well, we're going to make some changes, And I'm like, "Oh my God." Like, then I felt bad. Right. I felt bad that I was going to be taking someone's job but it was what it was. And then I was in that role for a few months and they're like, "We want to move you to San Antonio. We want you to be a regional over more properties." So even though I still had the same title, to me, I saw it as another promotion because I did get more money and I got more properties. And at that point I told my now ex-husband, I said, "Hey, I'm moving here for this. You can come with me if you want." Right. Because at that point I was like, I'm not living on your rules anymore. Right.
Because now you were building your own independence.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
They moved me to San Antonio. I got an apartment. Eventually, my ex-husband went with me, my son, and in all of this, I had to really think through this. Like, do I want to take this promotion and leave the role of medicine behind? Or do I take this promotion and change my degree to business? And after weighing all my options, I decided to take the promotion. Obviously, that's why I moved back to San Antonio. And I changed my education or my field of study to business management. And I applied for UTSA, got accepted. And the next 2 years of my life were consumed with working in a regional manager role, still taking care of my family, going to school full time.
Are you supporting your family at all financially during this time?
Yes, I
You
was.
are.
Yeah, the main source.
So you were sending money back to them.
Oh, like my mom and them.
Yeah.
Yeah, if she ever needed,
Yeah.
I was there. I was.
But you're saying the main source for your son and
Yes.
you. Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
Okay.
So, 2015, I ended up. I think through school, I created a LinkedIn account. It was a project we had to do, and that's when I created my, my bio, which includes the quote from Robert Frost's poem that you read earlier. And I ended up getting a call from a recruiter, or not even a recruiter. She worked for the company that she was trying to hire for, but that's all she did, recruiting. And she called me and she said, "Hey, I saw you on LinkedIn." I think she reached out to me through LinkedIn or something. I don't remember. Long story short, she said, "We're looking to hire a regional director of property management for a new portfolio we're buying in Texas, with one property in San Antonio and the rest in the Rio Grande Valley." I'm like, "What? That's like for me. Like, that's where I'm from. I know the language. I know the people. Like, and I know San Antonio, and I'm willing to move back home for this." And she said, "Oh, great." And I'm bilingual, and, and a lot of their in the demographic in the Rio Grande Valley is Spanish speaking. And so, mind you, I'm still in my late 20s at this point, and she talks to her boss, who has gone down in my history as one of my best bosses ever, Chuck Moran. She tells him, like, "You need to interview this girl. Like, she's great." Like, and he said, "No, she's too young. She's too young for this job. She can't do it." And she said, "No, you need to talk to her." So he flew down to San Antonio, and he met with me. He interviewed me. And in this time, I had already gotten accepted into the business immersion program through UTSA to go to Australia and New Zealand. This is in the summer of 2015. And I had one more semester left, which was the winter semester, right? And I told him, "Look," at the end of the interview, I said, "Look, I'm really grateful for the opportunity." I don't remember verbatim what I told him. I said, "But I have these two things." I said, "One, I have an immersion trip that I was just accepted into. There was only 20 students accepted out of all the 500 that applied." I said, "And we're supposed to go in July. So if you hire me, I would like the opportunity to attend that." Right. And he said, "Okay." And I said, another thing, I said, "I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college." And I said, "If you were to hire me, I would ask that you allow me the flexibility to finish this last semester." And he said, "I wouldn't have it any other way." And like that I'm quoting you verbatim. That's exactly how he told me. And I will never forget his words. He said, I wouldn't have it any other way." And I walked away so happy because I felt like it's in the bag, but I wasn't sure yet. So when I was in Australia, I get a call at 3 a.m, and it was from Vesta Corporation. I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" Like, I missed their call. It was 3 a.m, and I didn't have the tech stuff wasn't that, like, whatever. And I had like a phone, an international phone that they had advised us to buy only in cases of emergency because the calls would be expensive. And I said, "This is going to be the most expensive call I ever make. It better be worth it." So I called, and Shannon Jarosco, who was the HR person at that time, she answered, and she said, "Hey," she's like, "Why does it say Chevy Chase on my caller ID?" I said, "I don't know, but I'm calling you from an international phone." She's like, "Are you on the other side of the world?" And I said, "Yes, we're in Australia. We're in Sydney." And she's like, "Crystal, I was calling to, offer you the position." I was like, "What?" Like, oh my goodness. Like, yes, like, I will take it. And, I was so excited, and they wanted me to start like in August or something. So that's where I went from regional manager to regional director of property management with Vesta. Like, taking a step further in my career path in multifamily. And it was all these little things that I wasn't looking. It was my LinkedIn that I created for school. It was amazing when I think back on it. It's just, I don't know.
So when you think back on all of this, what percentage of this do you think is luck, and what percentage of this do you think is your ability to make it happen?
Oh, goodness. I think a lot of it stems back to me making it happen, because I could say part of it is luck, but luck wasn't what got me to UTSA. It was me working through it. Luck wasn't what got me to change my degree plan. It was me deciding this is going to be the best route because I have a child now, and me going to medical school and having a child, I'm putting him in second place, and I shouldn't do that. And that's why I ended up making the decision. It wasn't luck that got me through everything. It was self-determination, motivation, and me motivating myself and wanting to be better and do better for my family. It was God, intervening with my life when I was 13, 12, 13, and saying, we're going to make this happen. And luck has nothing to do with that.
Why go to college? When who pushed you to go to college?
I pushed myself.
Why did you push yourself?
Because I felt at that point that was one thing that I needed to do. It was one thing that I needed to do for myself. I also felt that was going to be my answer, that was going to give me the money, the status that I needed, the respect that I wanted. And I needed to do it. I needed to do it to check that box for myself and to tell my family it's possible. I wanted to break that generational curse of no education, no nothing, and it's okay. And I wanted to set a new standard.
So you're the regional director at this point in the story.
Right.
And you now are, I think a bunch of things have happened since then, but you're now VP of operations.
Yes.
What makes somebody go from property manager to VP of operations? Why doesn't everybody follow that path? Like, if you were to boil it down to like 3 things, what would those be?
I think one is a desire to not do it, and that's okay. Some people are very comfortable being a community manager. Some people are very comfortable being a regional manager or whatever falls in between. Some people are okay with that, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. That's one thing. 2, I think we allow life's challenges to overcome us versus us overcoming life's challenges. That's the second. Because I know I'm not the only one that has a story. Everyone has a story. And I think the third is not selling yourself. If anyone's going to sell you, it's going to be you. You have to understand what you have to offer. Always put your best foot forward and be sure to be your number one salesman, because no one else is going to do it for you. And that means you also have to work hard to be the best at everything, best you can at everything you're doing. That saying, they say, always be the smartest man or person in the room. Not so cliche. It's kind of important that, whatever you're doing, try to be the best at it.
Are you proud of yourself?
Not yet. I'm not where I want to be. I'm proud of how much I've done, what I've overcome, how much I've accomplished through it all. Aside from professionally, I was able to buy my mom a house. And the day that I gifted it to her was like a big weight lifted off my shoulders. She finally had a place to call her own. Being able to be there for my parents, for my sisters, whatever it might be, for any family member, friends. So I'm proud of how much I've done, but I'm not done yet.
Are you happy?
Am I happy? That's a really good question. I think happiness is found in a lot of different things, and there's not happiness in everything we do. It's a matter of creating it, and I do my best to create happiness in everything I do, everywhere I'm at.
How's your relationship with your mom now?
My mom and I are very close, and I would move mountains for her. And yeah, like I said, I don't judge her for anything. The decision she made, she did the best she could with what she was given. And to say that I have gained so much from the little she gave me is an understatement. You know, it's kind of ironic that she gave me so much by giving me so little. And I think that's probably one of the greatest things she could have done for me.
I want to talk a little bit about, you've been in the industry for a while.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen it change over the years.
Oh, yeah.
What is your view on AI just coming into the
Oh.
industry? Changing the topic
Ooh,
completely.
oh my gosh. AI is amazing and scary all at the same time. We joke, my boss's boss, Ian, who's one of the owners, partners of Luma Residential, where I'm at now, he told me that they talk to the AI overlords to make sure that they are protected in case AI overlords take over the world one day. So I have started talking to the AI overlords as well, just in case I need to secure my spot there in the AI world. But yes, it is fascinating how much we have evolved in technology. It's amazing that these systems that have been created can take so much data and process it so quickly, you know, beyond the scope of our imagination, you know. And I honestly think that I know these things had to have been in the works for a long time, but I think that COVID acted as a catalyst to a lot of this stuff, right? We really had to progress very fast in a very short time frame, you know. And I think that this is the tip of the iceberg of what AI is capable of doing. And I know that there's people out there like that are working on this. They're like, Crystal, you don't even know, you know. But just a little bit I've seen, and just little like Chat GPT, you know, everybody offering different AI systems for processing your leads, to answering phone calls, to chatting with people online. It's amazing how much it can do. It's amazing.
Do you think entire roles will be replaced, or pieces of roles? Like pieces of roles are already being replaced, but do you think we're going to get to a place where an entire role will be replaced?
I think there's one thing that I think, and there's one thing that I would like, right? One thing I think is that, yes, entire roles can definitely be replaced with AI. But what I would like is for people to understand that in our business, we're still in the business of people. And it's easy for me to say right now that I don't think AI can ever duplicate a person. You know, the human empathy and compassion and understanding, which is what I drove this conversation with, that it's something that I pride myself in having in the role that I'm in. And I'm not sure we can duplicate that in AI.
Where do you think, like you said, we're seeing AI in lead nurturing, in rent collections, and maintenance. Where do you think AI is not reaching in property management that it should be reaching, or tooling that should be built to improve some process that's not happening today?
Right. So again, I think AI is not reaching the emotional component, the human aspect of the business. It's not doing that. And I'm sure the sky's the limit with it. Who knows, right? But I think that AI will always have the potential to fail and not be corrected. And that's what's scary, right? When it gets so big that it's out of our control. That's kind of the scary side of it. So although AI is great, we need to make sure that we are considering the unintended consequences of that world, because then we're just going to be letting robots and AI and computer systems run everything we do. I won't even be sitting next to Shiv anymore. I'd be sitting next to some computer or something.
AI version of
yeah,
me.
an AI version of you asking me these questions.
Crystal, I want to thank you for coming on and being so transparent and vulnerable. I think personally, I've taken away a lot from this conversation, and I feel like people listening are going to as well, just because of how like honest you were and how genuine you were. So I really appreciate that. And I'm excited to build a friendship with you, and I can't wait till people listen.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity and the platform to share my story, and I hope it does inspire at least one person.
I'm sure it will.
Thank you.
Awesome.